Legal immigration through investment. What that means for the future of who gets to come to the United States. Is there a price for residency? Hi friends, this is Yami Virgin for Sinclair Broadcasting and another edition of Immigration Crisis, the fight for the southern border. This week we're focusing on legal immigration through investment and what that means for the future of who gets to come to the U.S. A new high-dollar visa conversation is putting attention on programs that tie immigration status to economic investment. Supporters say these pathways bring jobs and development. Critics say they raise serious questions about fairness and access. At the center of our episode is Abteen Vaziri, an immigration attorney, an Iranian American who first came to the U.S. as a political refugee with his family. His legal work focuses on the EB-5 visa program, which allows immigrants to earn a green card by investing in U.S. businesses and creating American jobs. It is one of the few legal pathways where capital and job creation are directly linked to permanent residency. Vaziri supports strong border control and believes deeply in legal immigration, shaped by his own journey when he and his family came to the U.S. as Iranian political asylum seekers. Who benefits from these programs and who gets left out? And what does it say about the direction of U.S. immigration policy?
I was a political refugee. I was born in Iran. My father actually did almost all of his Air Force training in the Iranian Imperial Air Force. My father was a colonel. He did almost all of his training in San Antonio. He was here in 72, 74, and 76. In 76, he came with my mother. My mom also worked for Lockheed Martin. Back then it was called Lockheed. She wasn't an officer in the military, but she was a kind of a private contractor. The mom and dad were in San Antonio. They went to Biloxi, Mississippi, at another Air Force base in Biloxi. They got pregnant with me, and then they went back to Iran for me to be born, and then got stuck in the middle of the revolution, which is something very similar to what we're having now. So I was born literally of a child of a revolution. I was born in the middle of martial law. My mother's water broke in the middle of martial law. My dad, who at the time was a major in the Air Force, had to get my mother to the hospital. He got stopped at several checkpoints and almost got shot by soldiers. And anyway, I was born in the middle of the revolution. Shortly after the revolution, my father was court-martialed and given a death sentence, and his only crime was that he said we should have a secular government. He was born Muslim. The majority of people in Iran were Muslim, but he said, we should keep religion outside of the government, and that was enough to basically get him a death sentence. So he was awaiting execution for 3 months, and then the Iran-Iraq War started. And my father, who had done his logistics training in the U.S. for 2 years, was valuable because he was in logistics and they needed to move troops. So a friend of his in Iran that he had gone to the military academy with, and in Iran, there's only one academy for all three branches. They don't have the Marine Corps, Army, Navy, Air Force go to one academy. A friend of his became the head of the Air Force, as 100,000 officers were either killed or ran away or purged. And so Iran's military wasn't ready. So he said, sign this pardon, but that means you have to come back to work. You have to serve. So he basically had to go serve the mullahs, military, essentially, serving Iran, saving Iran from Iraqi invasion. But it wasn't until the war ended that he was able to get a fake passport and a visa to Austria, Vienna. He escaped to Vienna, me, my mother, and my two sisters. We escaped to France. We waited in France and basically went to Belgium, went to Holland, ended up in Germany as political refugees. And then later on, we were sponsored for political refugee status in the United States by Catholic Charities of America, a sister organization in Germany called Kaiser. So we came to the United States as political refugees with a green card. I grew up in Iran, lived in Germany for a couple of years. I learned how to speak English and German. 2 days after we landed in Germany, the Berlin Wall came down. As you know, that was big news. So it was an interesting time in Germany. In 1991, we came to Los Angeles as political refugees. And then my father and mother decided they wanted to move us to Texas. So we ended up moving to Dallas in 95. I became a U.S. citizen in 1997. In 95, we moved to Dallas on December 2nd. So we just celebrated our 30-year anniversary of being a Texan. You know, I went to Plano Senior High here in Dallas. I attended Collin College. I got an associate's degree there. I attended University of Texas at Dallas, played soccer there, got a bachelor's in computer science there. I attended SMU got an MBA in finance. And then I was in the inaugural class of the UNT Dallas College of Law in 2014, the first class of that law school. I ended up having to drop out of law school, moved to New York, worked for a company called Greystone, where I actually met Karen. And then I ended up finishing my law school education in New York at Fordham University. And during COVID, you know, I just kind of got sick and tired of a lot of the nonsense that was going on in New York. So I moved back and then formally, you know, full-time moved back in 2023. Started my company here in Texas called the North Texas called the Uptown Companies. You know, I've basically been involved in EB-5 fundraising, and I'm an attorney licensed in Texas and New York, and I've worked with a lot of immigrants, a lot of immigrant families that I helped move to the U.S. to the EB-5 program.
Okay, so talk to me about the program, because right now a lot of people have the perspective that the administration does not want anyone coming into this country unless they can buy themselves one of the gold immigration cards.
Yeah, so it's actually an interesting thing that you mentioned. So you know, the current law, the EB-5 law, which expires the end of the fiscal year of 2027, which is September 30th, the last of the fiscal year. You know, the government fiscal year starts October 1st. So September 30th, 2027, the current EB-5 program expires, but it currently is the law of the land. The gold card and the platinum card that President Trump, through executive order, is trying to enact, those actually don't exist. Those are nice to have, would like to have. You know, there's different, you know, mindsets in terms of how that works from an immigration perspective, but they don't exist. I've done a lot of lobbying on behalf of the EB-5 program, so I go to Washington all the time. And in fact, I was very involved in writing the current legislation, the Reinvestment Act, RIA, which is the current EB-5 law. I worked with both sides of the aisle. I worked with you know, senators, staff, and then congressional, you know, House staff, to basically from a person that knows how the program works and has been there fundraising and knows the ins and outs. You know, I was on the board of directors of a organization called Invest in the USA. I was elected by my peers to be on the board of directors of that organization. As part of being a board of directors of that organization, we helped Congress formulate the current legislation that essentially cleaned up the EB-5 program. As part of that, I was just on a lobbying trip, you know, in November, before I actually filed to run for Congress. And we met with 6 different Senate staffers. We met with Senators Cornyn and Cruz from Texas, who are big supporters of EB-5. We met with Senator Moody's office from Florida, Senator Johnson from Wisconsin, Senator, I'm blanking on his last name, but Senator from Utah. And then the last one was Senator Warren from Massachusetts. By the way, this program is the EB-5 program is a program that was bipartisan. It was set up by Senator Ted Kennedy, also from Massachusetts. The big supporters of this program have always been Senator Grassley, which is a Republican from Iowa, and Senator Leahy, which is a Democrat from Vermont. It was always bipartisan support. What made EB-5 not so much attractive was because all the money was going to the big states like Texas, New York, Florida, California, and the small states were complaining that no money was going to their states. That was why the program really went for extinction. Not so much that it wasn't popular, but it was too popular. It's one of the very few government programs that was too popular. But I'll tell you, from this administration, from the Republicans' point of view, I spoke with a gentleman named Kenneth Lee in Senator Cruz's office, and Senator Cruz's office was this is what they said: we're very pro-immigration. We're pro merit-based immigration and immigration that adds value to this country. We're not against immigration, as everyone thinks. And by the way, the gold card and the platinum cards don't exist. And in order for us to do what the president wants to make them a reality, we're going to have to do some rulemaking in the Senate. And on the Senate side, we're going to have 60 votes to make this program a reality. You have to understand, you have to adjust the tax status. The tax code has to change. The immigration code has to change. There's several different pieces of legislation that are current law of the land that have to be amended for this program to be a reality. And what they think is actually this year, we're probably going to get permanent reauthorization of the EB-5 program in 2026, given that it's a 250-year anniversary of the United States. And they, both sides of the aisle, they really understand why the EB-5 program is important, because not only are we going and bringing in some of the best and brightest in other country here, people that don't need any entitlements, people that generally bring on average $4 to $5 million to the United States, people that on average are paying over their lifetime something about $4.5 million in taxes over their life. And the minute they sign their name on a dotted line, even though they're only a green card holder, they pay U.S. taxes. 5 years later, when they become citizens, if they choose to become citizens, they can get to vote in this country. But before they even get to vote, these people are paying taxes, and they're generating billions of dollars in foreign direct investment and come into this country and helping us rebuild this country.
How many people have you helped with this? Because this visa is a special visa. You have to put in so much money. You have to employ at least 10 people. How many people have you been able to help get this visa and get their residency card or their immigration card done?
I would say probably somewhere in the 800 to 1,000 families that I've personally been involved in helping them. Now, I've had staff and, other team members that help, but I'll give you an example. The Statler Hilton Hotel in downtown Dallas. That was a project that in the 1950s was one of the top hotels in the country. There's so much history there. It was the first hotel that had elevator music. There was the first hotel that had a Westinghouse TV. Elvis and Sinatra and Marilyn Monroe and Tina Turner had all performed there. And then this hotel was sitting vacant for 30 years. It had turned into senior living, and they were going to demolish it, even though it had so much history. And no one could figure out how to finance this. And I, with the help of several others, helped finance this hotel. And this hotel had basically $98 million, or 196 families that helped make this reality, brought this hotel back to life. And that was 196 families that I helped immigrate to the United States, and they did great for the Dallas economy, because they turned Main Street from an ugly piece of land, the decapitated, dilapidated building that was falling apart, to a beautiful building that I ended up having my own 15-year business school reunion at that same hotel. So these are just examples, but there's been so much foreign direct investment specifically to this district that I'm actually running that have been brought, and families from all over the place, from Europe, from Canada, from South America, every country you can imagine have contributed to our economy.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. What country?
Yeah,
what countries specifically have you been involved with?
In the early days when the EB-5 program started, it used to be something like 80% from China. Today is no longer that, and the wait times, actually China and India used to be the top two. They're not actually that prevalent anymore. Right now, my practice, believe it or not, is mostly Canadians. A lot of Canadians have had enough of 62% taxes. I deal with almost exclusively with Canadians, but I've been all over South America. I've been to 40 countries in the world, and so I've gotten investors from almost 40 countries. I've been to Turkey, I've been to Korea, I've been to Taiwan, I've been to 20 different cities in China. I've been to just all over Asia you can imagine. Dubai, UAE, Qatar. I've been all over South America, Uruguay, Argentina, Panama, Brazil. All those countries have helped contribute to our foreign direct investment. And a lot of those people are business owners that want to come here. And the EB-5 program is actually one of the very few programs where you don't have a family member sponsoring you. You don't have to rely on an employer sponsor you. You rely on yourself by virtue of you investing $800,000 in the U.S. economy and creating 10 full-time jobs for U.S. citizens. You get to qualify. And, I specialize in helping them do all that paperwork, and with developers that put all that paperwork together. In fact, when I worked with Karen in a previous life, that's what I did in New York, and I've been doing that now for myself, basically representing investors from a broker-dealer's perspective.
For people who are right now saying, how the heck are you going to get them in here when everybody thinks that we're shutting our doors to immigration? How difficult is it? How much of a background check are they going through to make sure that, nobody's coming in that's a terrorist, that's getting funded by terrorist organizations, or anybody that would be considered an enemy to the United States? It's not like they're letting them just walk in. That's what I'm trying to get to.
No, what you're saying is actually really, really important, because there's something like, I forget, several different federal agencies have to vet them. And so when an investor comes and invest that $800,000, They have to show that all the project stuff, which is like 3,500 pages of documents, every legal document, all the job creation document, all the proof of the viability of project, all of that you have to do on the project side. And then on the investor side, the investor has to show that $800,000, where they got it from. If it's from property, where they bought the property, where they sold it. Sometimes it's in other languages, they have to translate it, and we do all of that, right? Then they have to show that, not only was that money from a legal source, but that money actually from illegal ways went through legal channels to hit that project in the United States. Like, for example, I've had, I'm originally from Iran. I have investors from Iran. Most investors from Iran, we can't take because their money is what's called toxic. Now, if they have their money outside, sanctioned banks, let's say their money is in Dubai or their money is in London, we have to show where that money originated from. So all these different government agencies have to vet these investors. They have to make sure they're not part of the Communist Party. They're not part of a drug cartel. They're not part of Hezbollah, a terrorist organization. So all of this vetting is done, and that's why the application takes so long. Right now the applications are taking 7 months for rural project and almost 11 months for non-rural projects. In the old days, at some point, they were taking up to 24 months because all these different government agencies have to vet you. The Department of Homeland Security, FBI, they all have to vet you and make sure that, you don't, not only you're not a criminal, but that your money, you can show that you got it from legal means. So if someone were to kind of sneak into the country, this would be the dumbest way for them to do that because these people are extremely vetted.
Rural areas, what kind of businesses are we talking about?
That's a great question. So one of the basically agreements that the big states made with the small states, where in the old days, you could invest instead of $1 million, 500,000 if you invested in a high unemployment area. Today, to make those small states like Vermont, Iowa, and all those other states that were unhappy with the EB-5 program happy, now you can also invest in a rural area. A rural area is basically any project that's done in a city that's the population is less than 20,000. However, there's a caveat. The county cannot be in an MSA, cannot be in a metropolitan statistical area. So even here in Texas, and this is something that I actually fought for, try to change the language to say, what if the city is just 20,000, but it is in a county MSA? They wouldn't go for that. So for example, Farmersville is in Collin County, has like 2,800 population, but it doesn't qualify, even though it really is, the city is called Farmersville. It's really in the middle of nowhere, but it doesn't qualify because it's in Collin County, and Collin County is part of the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan statistical area. But for example, I'm doing a project right now in Rice, Texas, and that's in Navarro County, that is not in the MSA, and that qualifies. So this particular project is a truck stops that provides electric charging stations for large trucks, and then also fuel and a store for people that are passing by, right? So this would be an example of a project that's creating, hundreds of jobs and then thousands of construction jobs that is qualified as a rural. But there's all kinds of projects done, if anything from meat processing plants, to steel plant in Arkansas, to ski resorts, all of those create jobs. But one of the things that's really tough about the U.S. banking system is banks don't lend too much anymore on businesses. So the EB-5 program is really filling in the void where banks used to lend for hospitality projects. Today, if you want to build a hotel, there's no bank financing available. So you have to go to these alternative sources of financing, and EB-5 program right now is basically filling in the gap that banks don't.
What would you say to somebody that's listening to this and just says, don't we have enough people here in the United States that can invest without having to go outside of the states?
Well, the answer is no, because if it were, these projects that have been sitting on the shelf for years and years and can't get financing because banks don't finance them, those projects would get done. They're not getting done. So we have all kinds of data, all kinds of proof that shows that if it wasn't for the EB-5 program, a lot of these projects wouldn't get done.
I know, I cover a lot of the border down here, so I'll go from Del Rio to Terrell County, and there are some places like Terrell County, that's Sanderson. A lot of 18-wheelers will go through there, but there's nothing. And one of the things that stood out to me was a small little area in the downtown, which if you blink, you miss it, that has Airbnb, has a coffee shop. They were talking about doing a spa, and it's beautiful out there. It's right before you get into Big Bend. So how do you match people who may want to come with places as remote as the Texas border?
We don't really get involved in basically telling people or deciding people where they're going to move to. What we get involved in on the EB-5 side is capital, right? So people that have projects, that have capital projects, they come to us and say, hey, I'm looking to finance this. And we help them structure that. And we get thousands and thousands of projects that come our way. And maybe, and right now I'm on the investor side. There's no requirement for the investor to go live where they invest. Generally, immigrants tend to want to go where they invest, but there's no requirement. So an investor can come invest, for example, in Uvalde, Texas. Currently, there's an EB-5 project in Uvalde, which is rare earth minerals, which is exactly what the United States needs. It's not a project that I'm, involved in. It's one of the competitors, but it's a great project. They're bringing in foreign direct investment to Uvalde, which we all know was on the news for that, terrible shooting a couple years ago. But they're doing a rare earth mineral project there. Now, those people that are investing in that project, they may be immigrants living in New York. They may be living in Los Angeles. They may live in Dallas. They're not necessarily going in Uvalde, but they feel comfortable because they know that's a project that the United States needs, because we have a huge shortage of rare earth minerals and a lot of other type of industrial projects that are really, really hard to get local banks and local investors to finance.
South Texas, what kind of other projects have you seen or are they looking for right now?
That right now I've seen several projects actually, outside. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a, supply and demand, right? So people, they supply things that there's a demand for. But there's a Waldorf Astoria project outside of Austin. It's in the wine country, I think, in God, I'm blanking on the name.
Fredericksburg?
Not Georgetown, but the other one.
Fredericksburg is the big one.
Fredericksburg, yeah, it's in Fredericksburg. There's Florence, Fredericksburg, and Georgetown. Those are the three. But this one is in Fredericksburg, and that's an EB-5 project. They're building a whole, they're putting the whole project in. There's condos, there's hotels, there's wedding venues. But these are the type of projects that they're popping up now in rural areas where before. The adage in investment is always location, location, location. And now the rural areas are basically getting great location because they're getting approvals faster. So there's actually investors that are looking at doing rural projects because they go through the process of getting their immigrant status faster.
So if somebody hears this, they have family member in Mexico City who wants to invest, or in Panama or wherever else they want to invest, how do they go about doing so?
From my perspective, they can always contact me at, and I can help them put the program together. But there's various other groups, out there that are involved. They usually, the best way to do it is to go through a broker dealer that's registered by FINRA, that, has to go through all the FINRA requirements of getting licensed Tier 7 to be able to sell securities. Those are the best. There are people in other countries. By the way, I'm going to be in Mexico City on Friday, not for EB-5, but for a wedding. But the best way to do it is really doing your homework and making sure that you're, picking someone that's a broker dealer that really is going through the underwriting and looking at this, all the different parts of the project, the loan agreements, all of that, and making sure the project is suitable and fits your requirements. That would be my recommendation. And by the way, the other question that you had asked, the gold card that President Trump is trying to enact, that's got a lot of headlines because it's so, and I think Howard Lutnick came out there and said, oh, we sold 1,000 of these. That's not true because it doesn't really exist. I think they have a list of interest of 1,000 people that may be interested. But what's interesting is, the gold card is supposed to be, I forget which one's 5 million, and then the platinum card is 1 million. But if you're a family of 5, and you wanted to get the platinum card, you had to pay 1 million times 5. The EB-5 program with 800,000, which by the way, if you invest it correctly and you go through a broker dealer and they make sure that you're in a safe project where you're going to get your investment back, basically in exchange for the time value of money for the 800,000, your entire family gets a green card. So it's basically any spouse and any children under the age of 21 that are unmarried qualify under that one status. But on the gold card, it's really more a replacement for H-1B, because the gold card is really, the platinum card is really more of a business visa. It's not really so much a family visa. So EB-5, and when I talk to Ted Cruz's office and when I talk to other senators' offices, they intend for the gold card and the platinum card to coexist with the EB-5 program. And several other countries, for example, the UK, Australia, Canada, all of them have two-tiered approaches where, one type of visa is 2 million, another one's 5 million. For the UK program, they have a 1 million one, a 2 million one, a 10 million one. They're all different. So what I envision is really the EB-5 program is going to continue to be this middle class program for people to sponsor themselves to get a residency for the entire family. The gold card and the platinum card are meant to be really for corporations, Fortune 500 corporations that are trying to bring one single member of their, let's say somebody's running their Mumbai office and they need them here tomorrow to run a business division, they'll pay that 5 million or 1 million. So they're really not apples to apples. It's, the gold card, platinum card is really not meant to be an investor visa. It's more of a corporation visa. It's more of a Fortune 500 corporation visa. But what I would say is the other thing about the gold card and the platinum card is under current law, they don't exist.
And that is all for this week's edition of Immigration Crisis, the Fight for the Southern Border in San Antonio, Texas. I'm Yami Virgin for Sinclair Broadcasting, where we continue to be the eyes and ears of the southern border. Until next time.